What does it take to break a suspect who believes he's untouchable? Lee Rodart, taken into custody for the suspected kidnapping and murder of his co-worker Savannah Gold, was about to face an interrogation that could determine his fate. With no clues about Savannah's whereabouts, the detectives knew they had to tread carefully. One mistake, and they might never find her or bring the killer to justice. Lee, however, was confident. He had a story so airtight, he believed it would keep Savannah's location a secret forever. But what he didn't count on was the detectives' clever tactics, which
You here?
would slowly unravel his deception and force him into a corner. The answer lies in a brilliant move that would make Lee reveal the truth he so desperately wanted to hide: the CCTV footage. On August 2nd, 2017, a series of disturbing text messages sent a wave of fear through Savannah Gold's family. The messages, supposedly from Savannah herself, claimed that she was quitting her job at the Bonefish Grill and running away. But something didn't add up. The texts were riddled with spelling errors and awkward phrasing, completely out of character for Savannah. Her family's concern quickly turned to panic. They knew something was terribly wrong and immediately reported her missing. As the investigation began, the police were left grasping at straws with little to go on. Savannah seemed to have vanished without a trace. Days passed and her family's worst fears began to take root, until a critical piece of evidence surfaced: a chilling CCTV recording from the Bonefish Grill parking lot, where Savannah worked, offered a terrifying glimpse into her last known moments. The footage showed Savannah casually walking to a silver car, waiting for her in the parking lot. Without hesitation, she got into the vehicle. But what happened next was anything but ordinary. The car, still parked, began to shake violently, as if a struggle was taking place inside. The door was thrown open, only to be slammed shut, not once, but 3 times in rapid succession. It was clear that something had gone horribly wrong. Seconds later, the car sped off, disappearing into the distance. Savannah was never seen again. This haunting footage was the last clue the police had, and it set the stage for a high-stakes investigation into her mysterious disappearance. The prime suspect. After conducting a series of interviews and meticulously gathering witness accounts, the investigators stumbled upon a critical breakthrough: a car matching the description seen near the crime scene. This car, a nondescript but distinctive model, was registered to Lee Rodart, Savannah Gold's manager at the local grill, and her boyfriend of 2 months. With this revelation, the direction of the investigation underwent a dramatic shift. Lee Rodart, previously just a peripheral figure in the case, now became the focal point. The investigators quickly moved to arrest him, but they were careful to handle the situation with a strategic touch. To avoid tipping Lee off to the real nature of the investigation, they orchestrated his arrest under the guise of a minor traffic warrant, a detail that seemed trivial and inconsequential, designed to arouse minimal suspicion. Their strategy hinged on the element of surprise, keeping Lee unaware of the true reason for his detainment. They knew that if he suspected the arrest was linked to a serious crime, he would likely become more cautious and guarded, potentially derailing their carefully laid plans. Instead, by presenting the arrest as a routine matter, they aimed to maintain Lee's ease, making him more susceptible to inadvertently revealing incriminating details. As Lee was brought in under the pretense of a minor traffic violation, the detectives prepared for the next phase of their plan. The interrogation room was set up to appear casual, with minimal stress-inducing elements. They understood that a relaxed environment could encourage Lee to let down his guard. The detective leading the questioning adopted a subtle, conversational tone. Lee, relieved by the seemingly mundane nature of his predicament, entered the interrogation room with a false sense of security. He assumed that this would be a brief inconvenience, unaware that the detectives had meticulously crafted this moment to be the linchpin of their investigation. Interrogation. Lee was instructed to sit down, expecting only a brief wait, but instead he endured a grueling 90 minutes in the cold, sterile interrogation room, where the silence grew heavier with every minute. The harsh fluorescent lights cast a stark glare, amplifying the room's oppressive atmosphere. A few days earlier, Lee had been questioned about Savannah Gold's disappearance, a girl he had known well and thought little of at the time. But as the minutes dragged on, it became clear that this was not just a routine check-in. It was a serious and deepening problem. Although he had been confident in the infallibility of his plan and his belief that the police lacked sufficient evidence to link him to the crime, the extended silence began to chip away at his confidence. His earlier assurance that he had covered his tracks perfectly now felt increasingly precarious. When the door finally opened and the same detective who had interrogated him about Savannah's case re-entered, the realization hit him hard. This wasn't a new line of questioning, but a continuation of the same intense investigation. The initial sense of relief he had clung to evaporated, replaced by a wave of anxiety as he understood the gravity of his situation had only intensified. Despite his rising fear, Lee forced himself to stay composed, bracing for a more rigorous and probing interrogation as the detective prepared to delve deeper into his story. The suspicious answers. The detective casually asked Lee how long he had known Savannah, expecting a straightforward answer. Instead, Lee began to ramble, offering more information than needed. He explained that they had known each other for about 8 months since working at the same place, and that they had become close outside of work. He mentioned their connection due to similar backgrounds and how their relationship developed over a few months. Lee added that Savannah had started using drugs, and he distanced himself when it got serious. However, about a month ago, they reconnected and she visited his place a few times to relax and watch movies. Lee's answer, stretching on for over 5 minutes, was filled with unnecessary specifics, making the detectives more suspicious. The excessive details suggested he was trying too hard to seem open. Classic signs of someone who might be hiding something. The detective decided to start with a small challenge to see how Lee would react. During their first interview, Lee had claimed he hadn't seen Savannah for a while, but CCTV footage told a different story. To test him, the detective asked about their recent interactions. Lee explained that a few weeks ago, Savannah had come over with some drugs. He had advised her to stop using them and said that was the last time they had any communication. When pressed for details, Lee estimated it was a couple of weeks ago, somewhere in July. The detective then pointed out that Lee had previously stated their last contact was 2 to 3 weeks ago. Lee agreed, saying that was the last time they texted or called. But then the detective dug deeper, asking when he last saw Savannah in person. Lee hesitated but eventually admitted it was on Wednesday afternoon at a parking lot near Bonefish Grill. He even gave a specific time, around 5:30 p.m. What Lee didn't know was that his responses were already revealing key information. The police had footage showing him at the scene, and this was a crucial piece of evidence. Lee was unaware of the footage, so he didn't think to provide an alibi that would put him elsewhere. Although the evidence was piling up, it wasn't enough for a conviction just yet. The detectives needed more. Specifically, they needed Lee to fully confess. They understood this wouldn't be easy, but it was the next step in getting to the truth. The need for more evidence. The police had been short of the evidence needed for a solid conviction, so they pressed harder to extract a confession from Lee. Lee's attempt to create an alibi revealed more than he realized. He recounted a conversation with Savannah in which she supposedly asked to sit in his car because she was feeling paranoid after using heroin. This claim was questionable because nobody else had reported seeing Savannah use drugs, and even if she did, she was on her way to work at the time, making it odd that she couldn't simply chat in the parking lot. Lee went on to describe how he told Savannah that rumors about their relationship were jeopardizing his job and that they needed to stop. He claimed he warned her to cease her gossip or face worse consequences, like damage to her car. He asserted that Savannah had her phone in hand when she got out of the car and walked toward the main entrance of San Jose while he drove away. However, the facts were at odds with his story. Savannah never actually left the car. She drove off with Lee shortly after getting in. His detailed but inaccurate account only served to make him look more suspicious. The more he tried to cover his tracks, the clearer it became that he was building a mountain of evidence against himself with his lies. The importance of legal representation. Lee's persistent fabrications about the events surrounding Savannah's disappearance only deepened the hole he was digging for himself. His claim that a green truck arrived within minutes to pick her up was an attempt to divert suspicion away from him. Yet this desperate move only served to amplify the detective's concerns. The story was riddled with inconsistencies, details that didn't match up with the evidence they had. The detectives were well versed in spotting discrepancies, and Lee's shifting narratives only reinforced their suspicion that he was hiding something significant. Each new detail Lee introduced seemed to further entangle him in a web of deceit. The green truck was a critical point of contention. The detectives knew from their investigation that there was no record of such a vehicle being near the scene. His attempt to fabricate a story that was inconsistent with the available evidence only made him appear more guilty. Had Lee been honest from the start, he might have had a different outcome. If he had acknowledged that he and Savannah had parted ways at another location, this could have been verified or disputed through other forms of evidence, such as security camera footage or witness accounts. By providing a more accurate account, Lee could have potentially clarified his involvement and presented a defense based on verifiable facts. Instead, his continued dishonesty trapped him in a cycle of deception that only made his situation worse. This case highlighted a crucial aspect of the legal system: the importance of having legal representation during an interrogation. Detectives, while operating within the bounds of the law, have the legal right to withhold certain evidence and to use various tactics to elicit information. Without a lawyer, individuals like Lee are left at a severe disadvantage. They are forced to navigate a high-pressure environment with limited knowledge of what evidence the police have or what strategies they might employ. A lawyer would have ensured that all evidence was disclosed, providing Lee with a clearer picture of the case against him and helping him to prepare a more effective defense. The neck injury. When asked about the marks on his neck, Lee claimed that his neck injury was self-inflicted, attributing it to a rough patch he was going through. He said that the injury occurred in July when he used a knife on himself, although he was vague about the exact circumstances leading up to it. He attempted to downplay the severity by explaining that the wound had been aggravated over time, primarily due to accidents at work. Lee described how he would occasionally scrape the injury against objects. What made his explanation particularly suspicious was a lack of clear motivation or prior history of self-harm. Lee's story was inconsistent, with him struggling to maintain a coherent timeline of events. He mentioned that the wound had bled again just the night before the interview, yet the injury seemed more severe than what one might expect from minor workplace accidents. The detectives noticed the fresh blood and scabs, which contradicted Lee's claim that the injury had originally occurred several weeks prior. The specifics of how the wound had been managed, or rather mismanaged, raised further doubts about his honesty. His narrative didn't quite add up, and it was clear that the detectives were skeptical of his story. Signs of distress. Throughout the interview, Lee's demeanor and body language betrayed his growing anxiety. His explanation for the neck injury was met with suspicion, not just because of the inconsistencies in his story, but also due to his visible discomfort while recounting it. He displayed subtle yet telling signs of distress. His hands and fingers twitched and fidgeted whenever he spoke about the injury or other sensitive topics. This jitteriness was particularly pronounced when he was caught in a lie, or when the detectives probed deeper into his story. The detectives, aware of these behavioral cues, seemed to have strategically brought up the neck injury at this point in the interview. They likely noticed the fresh marks right away, but chose to mention them later to build psychological pressure on Lee. By catching him off guard with questions about the injury, they sought to exploit his already fragile mental state, amplifying his anxiety and paranoia. Lee's nervousness became more evident as the conversation progressed. His responses grew increasingly disjointed, particularly when the detectives shifted the focus back to Savannah's disappearance and the mysterious truck she was last seen entering. When asked why he hadn't reported the truck earlier, Lee's answers were evasive and inconsistent. He tried to justify his silence by claiming he was scared, knowing he was the last person known to have seen Savannah. However, his story faltered under the detectives' scrutiny. The more they pressed, the more Lee stumbled over his words, his jittery movements becoming more pronounced. His inability to keep his story straight, coupled with his obvious distress, only deepened the detectives' suspicion. They could see that Lee was struggling to maintain his composure, and they used this to their advantage, pushing him further into a corner where his lies would eventually unravel. The pressure builds. The detectives decided to maintain relentless pressure on Lee, methodically questioning him about Savannah's whereabouts. They began with straightforward questions, probing for every possible detail about where Savannah might be and framing their inquiries in a way that underscored the urgency of the situation. The lead detective emphasized the critical need to find Savannah, expressing a genuine hope that she might still be alive. He pointed out the devastating impact on her family if she wasn't found, appealing to Lee's sense of empathy by stressing the importance of providing closure to Savannah's loved ones, whether that meant finding her alive or bringing clarity to the tragic situation. As the questioning persisted, Lee remained steadfast in his claim of ignorance about Savannah's location. He repeated his story with a growing sense of defensiveness, but the detectives remained unconvinced. They escalated their approach, presenting evidence that contradicted Lee's statements, which only heightened the tension in the room. The detectives suggested that Lee might have been involved in something that had spiraled out of control, hinting at a deeper, more complex involvement than he was admitting. Their goal was not just to uncover the truth, but to break through the carefully constructed facade Lee had maintained. Emotional tactics. The interrogation took a dramatic turn when a previously quiet female detective began to speak. Her sudden involvement shifted the dynamic, catching Lee off guard. Unlike her male counterpart, who maintained a calm, professional demeanor, she approached Lee with a mix of vulnerability and emotional intensity. Her voice cracked slightly as she pleaded with him, bringing a human element into the cold, sterile interrogation room. She wasn't just a detective doing her job. She was a mother, a person who could imagine the pain Savannah's family was enduring. This emotional appeal was strategic. The detective's genuine concern and empathetic approach contrasted sharply with the relentless pressure Lee had been facing. She urged him to think about what it would mean for Savannah's family to know the truth, playing on any lingering guilt or humanity he might have left. She brought up the fact that they had evidence of a struggle in the car. Savannah had kicked the door 3 times, a sign of her desperation to escape. This wasn't just speculation. They had video proof. As she pushed for more details, the detective's tone became more pleading, almost begging Lee to come clean. She assured him that she didn't see him as a heartless person and that maybe he wasn't as cruel as the situation suggested. Her words were designed to break through his defenses, to make him see that cooperating was his best option. Despite his attempts to downplay the situation, the detectives made it clear they knew more than he was letting on, until the truth finally came out. The final confession. The detective leaned in, his voice steady and probing. He challenged Lee's reasoning, questioning why Savannah would have been with him if their relationship was so troubled. He highlighted the fact that despite their arguments and Savannah's apparent indifference, Lee needed to address what happened next. He emphasized that people make mistakes, but the critical part is how they deal with the aftermath. He appealed to Lee's sense of humanity and family. The detective asked Lee whether he wanted to be remembered as someone who did the right thing or as a cold, heartless individual who refused to help a grieving family find closure. He conveyed his belief that Lee wasn't inherently evil, but needed to come forward with the truth to ease the pain of Savannah's loved ones. Lee's facade began to crack under the pressure. He reluctantly admitted that the situation had turned violent. Savannah had been striking him during their argument, and in his desperate attempt to make her stop, he had squeezed her forcefully. When the detective inquired if he had squeezed her around the neck, Lee nodded, revealing that he had gripped her tightly, unable to let go, trying to force her to leave him alone. With growing desperation, Lee finally disclosed where Savannah's body was. He told the detective that she was in a pond located on the west side of Club de Clay. The confession, though painful, provided the crucial information needed for her family to begin their grieving process. Sentence. Shortly after the intense questioning of Lee Rodart, a dive team made a grim discovery that would alter the course of the investigation. While searching a remote area near a local waterway, they uncovered the charred remains of Savannah Gold. The condition of the remains was nothing short of horrifying. The body had been subjected to extreme heat, leaving it so badly burned that identifying Savannah was impossible. The severity of the burns made it equally challenging to determine the exact cause of her death, casting a shadow over the investigation. The detectives, already suspicious and feeling the weight of their responsibility, were confronted with this shocking evidence. They had pressed Lee relentlessly, But the discovery of Savannah's remains added a chilling gravity to their case. Faced with this damning proof, Lee Rodart could no longer maintain his facade of ignorance. Overwhelmed by the mounting evidence and the inescapable reality of the situation, he ultimately confessed to committing second-degree murder. In March 2021, Lee Rodart was sentenced to 40 years in prison. The court's decision reflected the gravity of his actions and the profound impact of Savannah's death. The length of the sentence ensured that Lee would face the consequences of his actions for decades to come, serving as a stark reminder of the cost of his wrongdoing. The severity of Savannah's death, combined with Lee's confession, sealed his fate, ensuring that justice was served and that he would remain incarcerated for a significant portion of his life. The case brought some measure of closure to Savannah's family and underscored the relentless pursuit of justice by law enforcement, even in the face of overwhelming challenges. Thanks for tuning in. If you're captivated by crime stories that keep you on the edge of your seat, hit that subscribe button for more thrilling content.